My wife and I have been bound by marital vows for 7 years, sharing a companionship that spans a decade. I am 37. She is 32, and until recently, our wedded life had been nothing short of remarkable. The occasional arguments were but a minor blip in our otherwise affectionate, satisfying, and joy-filled union. Our bed life was less frequent than in our early days, but still healthy and lively. My wife was everything I had ever dreamed of: intelligent, humorous, stunning, and I found immense satisfaction in the life I was able to provide for us. While my job demanded 40, 60 hours per week, she pursued her passions as a part-time professor at a local community college and a yoga instructor. However, my world collapsed around me 4 months ago when, in a moment of curiosity, I happened to go through her emails. A conversation with an unfamiliar male name caught my attention. The thread was filled with explicit exchanges, the man emailing my wife explicit videos of their illicit affair. My emotions surged like a storm, shock and anger being the predominant forces. With hours before her return home, I used the time to collect myself and plan my next steps. The videos were like a haunting echo playing over and over in my mind, shattering my belief in the life we painstakingly built together. I prepared to confront her, intending to leave for the night to process the crushing reality on my own. Upon her return, I confronted her with the undeniable evidence. Instantly, she broke down, her tears streaming down her face as she admitted to her indiscretion and apologized profusely. My anger peaked, and I informed her of my decision to leave for a while. Her sobs grew louder, pleas for my stay echoing in the room. During my stay at my brother's, she continuously reached out expressing her love and remorse. After 2 weeks, I found myself missing her, leading me to return home and attempt reconciliation. I was met with the same vague answers every time I questioned her actions. The man was a 27-year-old professor who had recently joined her department. She vowed to regain my trust, proposing a set of measures, including cutting off all contact with the man, changing jobs, allowing me to monitor her location and access her emails, taking an STD test, and seeking professional counseling. Her deep remorse was evident, and her commitment to our reconciliation was unwavering. She lived up to her promises and was genuinely grateful for the second chance, making it a joy to be around her. Yet the damage had been done. Despite our progress, the memories of her affair, particularly the explicit videos, were a constant source of agony, humiliation, and embarrassment. The resentment towards my wife was immense and impeded our progress. Their close relationship was unprotected. The man well-endowed. She seemed to enjoy their encounters more, wearing new lingerie and participating in acts that she had previously deemed distasteful in our relationship. Her enthusiasm was markedly higher with him, even going so far as to engage in acts we had never considered, much to my dismay and confusion. My attempts to understand why she engaged in these acts with him when she refused to do so with me always met with an "I don't know." My self-esteem plummeted, the haunting images of their encounter serving as a cruel reminder of my perceived inadequacies. Our intimacy suffered. As a result, my mind continuously plagued with the thought that I might not have been enough for her. The fallout of my wife's infidelity was a wound that had festered. Our efforts towards reconciliation were merely an attempt to mend a fabric that had been torn beyond repair. The memories of the affair, the explicit videos were deeply etched into my mind, each detail causing fresh agony. My resentment towards my wife grew, the trust one had placed in her having been irrevocably shattered. I was stuck in a vortex of humiliation and embarrassment. The moments she shared with the other man were too graphic and explicit, acts that she had never engaged in with me. It was a cruel reminder of my perceived inadequacies, and my self-esteem plummeted. Their enthusiastic encounters, her apparent enjoyment, and the participation in acts that she had previously deemed distasteful in our relationship only fueled my sense of betrayal. As days turned into weeks, my feelings of betrayal transformed into a desire for retribution. If her AP was capable of shattering our lives without remorse, then he deserved to feel the consequences of his actions. The thought of revenge began to consume me. I had unrestricted access to my wife's email as part of her attempt to regain my trust. Among her emails, I found more explicit videos of their affair, each one a damning piece of evidence against the man. An idea began to form in my mind, a plan that would expose the professor for what he truly was. I began to meticulously extract all the videos from her email, preserving them in a separate secure location. I researched the man further, learning about his personal and professional life. I discovered he was married. His actions had not only violated my marriage, but his own as well. The time for revenge was drawing near. I started to compile a list of contacts which included the students of the professor, his co-workers at the university, and most importantly, his wife. Each person on that list would receive an email, an unfiltered glimpse into the man's true character. The process of preparing for my retribution was painstaking. I created an anonymous email account, ensuring that it couldn't be traced back to me. I began drafting the email, careful to ensure that my words were as cutting as the evidence I was about to provide. As the days passed, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. I was no longer a victim, but a man reclaiming his dignity. When the time came, I sent the emails. Each recipient received the videos and a detailed account of the professor's affair with my wife. In the immediate aftermath of my retribution, the reaction was swift, brutal, and far-reaching. The emails with their lurid, explicit content spread across the university faster than a wildfire on a dry Californian day, setting off a chain reaction within the academic community that was astonishing to behold. The ripples of shock and disbelief began to spread outwards from the heart of the scandal, catching everyone in their path and leaving them in a state of stunned shock. The professor, once a respected academic authority, found himself suspended pending an investigation. His reputation, carefully built up over years of dedicated service and perceived integrity, was now tarnished beyond recognition. He was faced with allegations of immoral conduct that eclipsed his previous achievements and thrust him into the limelight for all the wrong reasons. A man who had been trusted to guide and educate the next generation was now seen as a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The students who once looked up to him turned against him, their respect and admiration replaced by a deep-seated disgust and a sense of betrayal. They protested his presence, refusing to attend his lectures and demanding his expulsion. Some even went as far as to boycott his classes entirely, while others took to social media to express their anger and disgust. The man's colleagues were no less merciful. They distanced themselves from him, their faces mirroring their disgust and disapproval. The academic community is a close-knit one, and the shock waves of his misconduct spread quickly. His office became a pariah's den, with colleagues avoiding it like the plague. The camaraderie once shared was replaced by cold shoulders and averted eyes. Some of his fellow educators, in a spectacular display of public shaming, projected the explicit videos onto the large screen in the lecture hall, ensuring that the man's disgrace was visible for all to see. The fallout was not just limited to his professional life. In his personal life, the professor was met with shock, anger, and betrayal. His wife, a woman who had stood by his side through thick and thin, was devastated. She filed for divorce, unable to bear the weight of his betrayal. The circle of friends, which they had so lovingly built over the years, quickly took her side. The professor's home, once filled with love and laughter, now echoed with the sounds of accusations and heartbreak. His actions had not only destroyed my marriage, but his own as well. Meanwhile, my wife was completely blindsided by my actions. I had not informed her of my plans, wanting to shield her from the inevitable backlash. When the email surfaced, she was as taken aback as everyone else, perhaps even more so, as she grappled with the enormity of what she had done. I watched from the sidelines, my heart heavy with a mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of satisfaction. Her remorse, which had once been a hollow echo of regret, was now a profound, gut-wrenching understanding of the damage she had caused. The tears she shed were no longer for herself, but for the pain and humiliation she had inflicted upon me. She began to see the full extent of her actions, the ripple effect they had caused, and the devastation left in their wake. In the weeks that followed, I made the decision to file for divorce. She pleaded for another chance, promising to change, to make amends, but the trust that had once been the bedrock of our relationship was now gone, replaced by a deep-seated resentment that no amount of remorse could erase. The divorce proceedings were a stark, painful reminder of the love that had once blossomed between us. As I watched her across the room, I saw not the woman I had fallen in love with, not the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with, but a stranger. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the woman she had become, but for the woman she used to be, the woman who had filled my days with laughter and my nights with warmth, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant, my best friend, the woman who was now a ghost, a painful echo of the past. In the end, I walked away with a heavy heart. Our marriage was over-reduced to a pile of divorce papers and a string of broken promises. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I realized that I was also walking away with my dignity intact. I was no longer just the man who had been betrayed, but the man who had stood up against betrayal. I had exposed the man who had wronged me, and I had held my wife accountable for her actions. The following months were a time of healing and self-discovery. I sought therapy to deal with the emotional turmoil working through my feelings of betrayal, humiliation, and inadequacy. I reconnected with old friends, finding solace and understanding in their company. I threw myself into my work, finding a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment in my professional achievements. I began to rebuild my life brick by brick, slowly but surely. I turned my focus inwards, embarking on a journey of self-discovery that was as enlightening as it was painful. I began to realize that my worth was not defined by my wife's actions, but by my own. I was not the man my wife's infidelity had made me believe I was. I was not inadequate. I was not insufficient. I was deserving of love, respect, and loyalty. The haunting images of the affair, which had once consumed my every waking moment, gradually lost their power over me. They were replaced by a newfound sense of self-worth, a sense of self-respect that was stronger than any blow my wife's betrayal could ever deliver. In the end, I emerged stronger, more resilient. I was a man who had faced the worst kind of betrayal and had come out on the other side, not unscathed, but unbowed. I had reclaimed my dignity and my self-respect, proving to myself that I was enough. I was not just a survivor of infidelity, but a man who had turned a painful experience into a chance for personal growth and self-discovery. I had faced down the specter of betrayal and had not allowed it to break me. Life after the divorce was a strange new reality that I had to navigate. My home, once filled with shared memories and laughter, now echoed with silence. It was a stark reminder of the void that her absence had left. But in that silence, I found a space to heal, to reflect, and to grow. I developed a routine, finding comfort in the predictability and stability it offered. I began to take better care of myself, both physically and emotionally. I took up new hobbies, rekindled old passions, and rediscovered parts of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of the marriage. As I embarked on this new chapter of my life, I also sought solace in my work. My career, once just a means to an end, became a source of fulfillment. I immersed myself in my research, finding a sense of purpose and accomplishment that I had not felt in a long time. My colleagues noticed the change in me, their respect for my resilience and determination adding to my growing sense of self-worth. Second story. The story begins when I was a mere child of 10, and so was she. It's a strange sensation to look back, knowing that the girl I played tag with in the park would one day become the woman I would marry and, ultimately, the woman who would shatter my heart into a 1,000,000 pieces. We were best friends who blossomed into lovers, and by the age of 18, we were inseparable. Infatuated doesn't even begin to describe it. We were magnetically drawn to each other, and the intensity of our feelings was so fierce that it seemed inevitable we'd end up together. So when I popped the question on a romantic Valentine's Day getaway at the age of 21, it was merely a formality. We both knew we were meant to be. Our life together was beautifully mundane. We both held respectable jobs, maintained a cozy and immaculately kept home, and were surrounded by a warm and supportive circle of friends and family. It was the kind of life you'd see in picture-perfect Instagram posts, but it was ours, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. But I would soon discover that perfect was merely an illusion. The first cracks in our seemingly flawless relationship appeared when I stumbled upon a string of texts on her phone from a colleague. There was no explicit flirting, but there was an undercurrent of something that gnawed at my gut. The messages were suggestive, bordering on inappropriate, and it set off alarm bells in my head. Fueled by a potent mix of fear and anger, I confronted her, demanding that she cut off all contact with him. She complied, blocking him right in front of me. I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward to one fateful Sunday night. I co-owned a thriving business with my cousin, a venture we had poured our blood, sweat, and tears into since we were 20. The workload was often intense, and on those nights, I'd opt to sleep at the office. That night was one of those nights, or at least it was supposed to be. I texted my wife around midday, letting her know that I'd be working late and not to wait up for me. She responded within minutes, expressing disappointment, but understanding and reassuring me of her love. Little did I know that her words would soon be rendered hollow. Later that evening around 7 p.m., I decided to surprise her by coming home early. As I entered our home, a sense of foreboding washed over me as I heard hushed voices from upstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I ascended the staircase, every step feeling heavier than the last. And then I saw them, my wife and the man from the text messages, their bodies entwined in a tableau of betrayal. Rage consumed me. I lunged at the man, my fist connecting with his face before he even had a chance to utter an apology. I threw him out of our home, leaving him shoeless and defeated. My wife, on the other hand, was a sobbing mess, pleading for forgiveness and spouting excuses that fell on deaf ears. I didn't have the energy or the desire to listen. Instead, I told her to pack her bags and get out of my sight. In the aftermath of the confrontation, my phone was flooded with calls and messages from her friends and family, which I ignored. The only person I spoke to was her father, who was as livid as I was and surprisingly sided with me. But despite the support, I felt a profound sense of loss. The woman I had loved for almost my entire life had thrown away everything we had built for a sleazy fling with a coworker. The realization was like a punch to the gut, and it left me reeling. With the reality of her infidelity, our shared dreams crumbled like a sand castle at high tide. She had broken our sacred bond, and the love I had for her was now tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. As I watched her pack her belongings, her sobs echoing off the walls of our once happy home, I felt a surge of resentment and hurt. I had loved her with all my heart, but now all I felt was a hollow emptiness where that love used to be. With each item she placed in her suitcase, it felt like another piece of our shared past was being erased. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. I had hired a divorce lawyer, a stern yet empathetic man who assured me he would handle everything. We discussed our shared assets, our financial commitments, and the possibility of alimony. Every conversation, every document signed was a stark reminder of the impending finality of our relationship. It was a difficult time, but the thought of being legally free from her and the pain she had caused me propelled me forward. Weeks later, just as I was beginning to find some semblance of peace, she appeared at my doorstep, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. She was pregnant. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. The possibility that I could be the father of her child sent a jolt of panic through me. I demanded a DNA test, refusing to accept the child as mine until I had irrefutable proof. The process was more complicated than I had anticipated. The prenatal paternity test involved drawing blood from her and the fetus to compare the DNA. It was a wait of a few weeks that were filled with anxiety, resentment, and a strange sense of hope. But when the results came in, it was like a punch in the gut. The child was not mine. The truth of her pregnancy added another layer of complication to an already painful situation. The man she had had an affair with, the biological father of her child, was himself married, and his wife was expecting too. He had made it clear he had no intentions of leaving his wife for her. Watching her realize the magnitude of her mistakes was a sight that invoked a myriad of emotions within me. There was a part of me that felt satisfaction seeing her confront the consequences of her actions, but there was also a part that felt pity. She had made her choices, and now she was left alone, pregnant with a child, conceived from an affair. As she walked away from my home for what I hoped would be the last time, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The woman I had loved and lost was now just a painful chapter in my life, a chapter that had ended, leaving me with the freedom to start anew. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to move forward, leaving the past and its painful memories behind. The future held possibilities, and despite the pain, I was ready to explore them, to rebuild my life from the ruins of a love that at once meant everything to me.